Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Jones. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the volunteer host for today. I'm happy to be with you today in the spirit of shared values and community. And it's nice for me to be in front of a friendly crowd, especially among all this weather I've been enjoying lately. Whether you're a longtime member or a first-time visitor, in person or joining via live stream, I'm glad you're here. So that our time together is not interrupted, please take a moment to silence your devices and put them on Do Not Disturb or airplane mode or whatever keeps them quiet. I appreciate each of you and your consideration and respect for one another. I'm excited to get started today by welcoming our musical guest, Katera. From mesmerizing ballads to electrifying beat sets, Katera Parson is a powerhouse singer-songwriter, pianist, and producer whose music transcends genres. This St. Louis native weaves soul, R&B, jazz, hip-hop, and classical influences into unforgettable performances that resonate deeply with audiences nationwide. Her first selection today is Where is the Love by Roberta Flack. Please join me in welcoming Katera.
Got to know, oh, where is love? Where is love? Where is love? Where is love? Thank you.
Thank you, Katera. That was fantastic. We spoke briefly before platform. I told her I was looking forward to the piano. I didn't know about the vocals too. I knew they were coming, but I didn't know what to look forward to there. Thank you. Each week, we read the Ethical Education for Youth core values as a way to bring us together and remind us of our shared commitments. Today, our core values reader will be Axel Jones. This was not my choice, but
Every person is important and unique. Every person deserves to be treated fairly and kindly. I can learn from everyone. I am a part of this earth. I cherish it and all the life upon it. I learn from the world around me by using my senses, mind, and feelings. I am a member of the world community, which depends on the cooperation of all people for peace and justice. I can learn from the past to build for the future. I am free to question. I am free to choose what I believe. I accept responsibility for my choices and actions. I strive to live my values.
Nice job, Axel. The youth education program is available to all children and provides a robust ethical education. It is now time for opening words, when we get to learn more about our fellow community members and their interests and passions. And our children are going to make their way downstairs also. This is a time to deepen our connections with one another. Herb was scheduled to give opening words today, but David Brown told me he would step in last minute because Herb couldn't make it. So please welcome David Brown for opening words.
Good morning. Okay, well, these are my elder statesman words, a little personal history and a few observations. So I was in diapers when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. I didn't remember really, but they had to be cloth diapers because that's all we had in those days. My toys were made of wood and metal. We didn't have plastic. I stored some of my toys in boxes which originally held 1,000 IBM cards. Those were for my father because he ran one of those shops that did all the automated accounting on all those noisy old machines that sorted and punched and so forth. So my family were members of a fundamentalist Christian denomination. And I grew to believe in their teaching. That's what I was brought up with. I even went to their college for my first 2 years. My early years were in the Jim Crow South in Dallas, Texas. I remember white-only drinking fountains and restrooms. Blacks and whites had their separate roles in society. Racial slurs were common. My memory is that I was not comfortable with that, but that's how it was. Other races and LGBTQ people were ignored. They didn't exist, really, as far as we're concerned. The aftermath of World War II, Brown versus Board of Education, and the Civil Rights Movement of the 60s changed all of that. I didn't vote for John Kennedy for president in 1960 because you had to be 21 to vote. I missed it by a little bit. And my church opposed him because as a Catholic, his allegiances were to the Vatican. I like to think I would have voted for him and ignored my church, but who knows? The evolution of species is what really got my attention. I read books that I didn't understand about it and realized that the people who studied evolution were actually really serious scholars. As I was in college at the time, I observed that scholars took questions very seriously and used them to increase their knowledge of the world. My church says, well, we have the truth and the Bible. We don't need any of that stuff. And that led me to leaving my church. During my first year of graduate school in Lincoln, Nebraska, my wife and I listened to a Saturday evening radio discussion program which featured a Protestant minister, a Catholic priest, and a Jewish rabbi. And I don't know whether they ever went to a bar, but at any rate, it was moderated by the Unitarian minister, and we were so impressed by the Unitarian minister that we went to his church. So after 6 years of graduate school and knocking about, we moved to St. Louis, where we became very active members in Elliott Unitarian Chapel in Kirkwood. After about 25 years at Elliott and the death of my wife, I married Sherry Green, whom a lot of you know, my current wife. My wife. Don't tell her, she's not here today. However, we didn't like the new minister who came in 2002 and decided to switch to the Ethical Society, and it was actually a better match for our beliefs. Over the years, as I've been active in liberal religious tradition, I've observed some things. One is that very few of our children, Unitarians and the Ethical Society as well, don't follow in the religious footsteps of their parents. There are very few second-generation Unitarians or Ethical Society members, although Herb Morrissey actually is one. He used to go to Sunday school at the Sheldon. Sunday school is very important to the health of a liberal religious organization. It brings whole families to be active members. Another important element is a music program. People who want to sing find being in a choir a very fulfilling activity that keeps them going. When we left Elliott Chapel, there were several choir members who were likewise dissatisfied with the new minister, but they wouldn't leave because they were learning so much from the choir director. So Elliott Chapel switched to having 2 Sunday morning programs because their meeting space was too small relative to the size of their Sunday morning attendance. We have the opposite problem. Our auditorium is a much larger space than our attendance. We need to increase our membership and Sunday morning attendance so we can better support this incredible building and make our Ethical Society a more vibrant place. Let me also mention the importance of a good minister or leader. The leader sets the tone for the organization and serves as the face of the organization to the community. When people look back over the history of this sort of organization, they partitioned that history in terms of who was the leader at the time. Back in the 1990s, a person seeking a liberal religious organization in St. Louis could choose between Elliott Unitarian with John Robinson, First Unitarian with Earl Holt, Ethical Society with John Hode, or Central Reformed Congregation with Susan Talby. These were our sister organizations, and together we form a force for ethics and good works in St. Louis. For over a century, this Ethical Society has been known in St. Louis as a progressive congregation standing for ethical values and philosophical thought. Despite the tumultuous times in which we live, I believe we can find ways to grow our membership and continue to be a leading force for ethical values. Thank you.
David, thank you for stepping in today and sharing with our community. Thank you for sharing today. If you are a member and would like to share opening words, we will happily get you on the schedule. You can contact Carol Beer or send an email to the Platform Speakers team at platformteam@ethicalstl.org. I hope you will take advantage of the opportunity to share about yourselves. I'd like to welcome Katera again for her second selection, an original composition titled Cake.
So Cake is an original piece that I wrote in 2020 during the height of COVID, and it's an acronym for, bear with me, careless actions killing everyone. Pretty intense, but when you hear the song, you'll understand where I come from. It plays on Marie Antoinette's Let Them Eat Cake, And it empowers those who are oppressed to stand up for themselves and lift their voices to oppressors that constantly neglect them. Sad diseases and your sickness and our health. We're thriving on your back, sweeties. You say we can't clue into your pain. Heard about it, just don't care. We got summers to your reign. Got money just to spare. Twiddle my thumbs and made you wait. Oh, take these crumbs and eat your cake. Twiddle my thumbs and made you wait. Take these crumbs and eat your cake. Apathetic, mass confusion. We don't know the life you live. Patriotic, mass delusion. We don't have a care to give, no. We don't have a care to give, no. Schedule's full and pockets fat, can't see past the girth of our wallets, no, no, no. Lounging high up in our castles while we scrape for direct deposits. Twiddle my thumbs and twiddle my thumbs and made you wait.
Thank you, Katera. Before our main address, we'd like to take a moment to still our minds, relax our bodies, and take some mindful, deep breaths. Please join me for 1 minute of mindful breathing. Thank you. Our platform address today features Paul Lynch. Paul Lynch is an associate professor of English at St. Louis University. He teaches courses in rhetoric, writing, and literature. He directed the prison education program from 2021 to 2023, and he currently participates in a book club at the facility. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Paul Lynch.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I want to thank Catherine especially for the introduction. I'm always very grateful for the chance to talk about SLU's prison education program, which, as Mike said, I directed from 21 to 23. And I've been involved in, I was trying to think of it this morning, I think for over 10 years, which seems hard to believe. What I thought I'd do this morning, I don't have any slides, just because there's really nothing to put on slides except random dates. And as you can imagine, the prison frowns on us when we try to take pictures of the facility. So I don't really have any images to share with you. I just hope you ask you to use your imagination as I kind of describe the day-to-day experience. I thought I'd begin by just talking about the foundation of SLU's program and put it in the context of prison education in the United States as it currently stands. I should say at the outset, as Mike said, I'm a professor of English. I'm not a criminologist. I'm not a penologist. I have no expertise in these areas, but some knowledge gained from my experience of directing the program. And then I thought I'd talk about what teaching in the program is actually like day to day. I can say, to skip to the end for a second, it's a deeply rewarding experience and some of the most enriching teaching I've done in the 30 years that I've been a teacher in a variety of contexts. But let me begin at the beginning. And a former colleague of mine at St. Louis University, a gentleman named Kenneth Parker, was watching 60 Minutes on Sunday night, as you do, and he saw a clip on the Bard Prison Initiative. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Bard Prison Initiative, but Bard College in upstate New York started their prison program in 1999. It was a couple of student alumni, very young, impressively young, who began this program. And it has become kind of the gold standard of prison education programs in the United States, which is why it was featured on 60 Minutes. If you're interested in learning more about it, there's a great documentary called Prison Behind Bars, which I think you can stream on the PBS website, executive produced by Ken Burns. Anyway, so Ken's watching TV, and he sees this segment on the prison initiative, and he begins to think, why doesn't SLU have something like that? We're a Jesuit Catholic school. That seems like the kind of thing we would do. But Ken was a very busy scholar, and at the time, a single father of 3 teenage boys. So of course he thought, it's probably more than I can take on at this moment. And he was talking to his downstairs neighbor, who herself had been incarcerated. And he was kind of sharing that he'd watched this, and he thought about it, and then dismissed the thought that, it's just going to be too much for me to take on. And she said to him, well, Ken, if it's something you actually care about, you'll do something about it, right? And he felt sort of chastised by that. Yes, I think that was his reaction. And so he began to look into how SLU might do this. Now, I will spare you all the bureaucratic ins and outs. The only thing worse than perhaps a prison bureaucracy is a university bureaucracy, as you can imagine. But it came together fairly quickly. so really surprisingly quickly. The university was enthusiastic about it. Ken had some connections with religious sisters who work in prison ministry, and it put him in touch with some folks. And he finds himself sitting across the table in just a few months from an assistant warden at the ERDCC, which is in Bonne Terre, Missouri, about an hour southwest of here. I'll pause for a second just to describe the ERDCC. It's the Eastern Regional Diagnostic and Correction Center. It is a 2,700-bed maximum security state facility. It's the diagnostic center because if you're sentenced to prison time in the eastern part of Missouri, you begin your time in Bonne Terre, where they decide where you're going to spend most of your time. Each incarcerated person has a security number, and that determines where they go. That's the diagnostic part of it. And then the correction center, of course, is the actual main prison where we do our work. It's maximum security. It's the home of the state's death chamber, which is weirdly down the hall from the visiting room. You don't know that unless you've been there for a little while, but there's a door off to the side and just down the hall, which I mention that only because it speaks to the bizarre nature of prison life, that someone designed this and thought the visiting center where children visit their fathers and their grandfathers, and could be down the hall from the death chamber. And I've been teaching, as I say, for 30 years. I've had classes canceled for a variety of reasons: snow days, ice days, rain days when I taught in Kingston, Jamaica, and a tropical storm came through. But it's an odd thing to have to cancel class because of an execution, which happens not infrequently. Our classes are on Tuesdays, and so are executions. So that's the ERDCC. I'll come back to the description of getting into the prison in a minute. Anyway, Ken is sitting across the table from a deputy warden, and he's looking at Ken's proposal, and is completely impressed by it. I mean, it's obvious that this is a good idea. Again, I'm not a criminologist, but there is simply no doubt that the single best way to ensure that incarcerated people will not return to incarceration after release is education. I'm not sure I believe in silver bullets, but it is the closest thing there is to a silver bullet. The correlation is unmistakable, that the more college education incarcerated people receive, the less likely they are to ever find themselves back in prison. So this deputy warden said, well, obviously we have to do this, right? We have to take advantage of SLU's offer. But he said, I got to tell you though, this ticks me off too. And I said, why? And he said, because I'm still writing checks for my student loans, right? And you're about to give college education to criminals. These were his words, right? And I mentioned that. I mean, he supported the program, right? He signed off on it, helped us get in. He was absolutely in favor. But I think he was speaking to something that's worth just talking about and dwelling on for a second. It's a question we get not infrequently. And I can tell you that part of the reasons SLU, or prison education in general, it's starting to flourish more now. But there's a great irony in the fact that the 1994 Omnibus Crime Bill, I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it's the crime bill that's very often cited for the explosion in incarceration in the United States, right? Re-incarcerate at one of the highest rates in the world. And that crime bill also stripped Pell Grants away from incarcerated people. So in 1982, there were about 350 programs, prison education programs in the United States. In 1997, there were 8, because that decision just decimated. So we increased, this was our criminal justice policy, to increase the amount of incarceration while also diminishing the single thing that's going to make it less likely, not single thing, but one of the most important things, make it less likely for men and women to reoffend. So starting these programs at this time, we were kind of in a no man's land. Now I'm happy to say Pell Grants have been restored. And now the Alliance for Higher Education in Prison lists about 450 programs on its website working across the United States. So there are glimmers of hope in this area. But that sense of why would you provide education to criminals, I think was behind the stripping of Pell Grants, right? And it's an attitude we encounter, as I say, not infrequently. And there are a few arguments we would make. One I've already made is that prison education reduces recidivism more reliably than almost anything else we can do. And number two, related to number one, is that the vast majority of people in prison will be released at some point. They're going to come home. They're going to be our neighbors at some point. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of neighbors do we want? And what kind of neighbors do we want to have been to these people? I mean, the ERDCC does have men serving life without parole. We have some students, after a long struggle with the administration, some students in our program who are life without parole. There's an elder care unit at the prison because, a lot of men they're spending their senior years there and they're going to die there. So that's a reality as well. But the vast, vast majority of people inside prison are going to be back with us at some point. So prison education is useful for that as well. And the third, and I think most important reason for prison education is that I think it's a human right. I'm sure some of you have been following the news recently that our Secretary of Homeland Security took a picture, flew to El Salvador, to the Supermax, well, I would call it a gulag, actually, prison in El Salvador, and took a picture in front of a bunch of incarcerated men, where our government has now deported about 300 Venezuelan nationals. It's a disturbing photo for a variety of reasons, but one of the things about that prison that's worth noting is that it denies, in addition to denying due process, it denies three other things to those men who are incarcerated. One, it denies family visits. Right? Two, it denies outdoor education of any kind, and three, it denies, or outdoor recreation, excuse me, and three, it denies education. I mention that because I think it's telling that in the most brutal kind of prison situation you could imagine, one of the things they will take away is education, right, as a means of punishment. And I think that speaks to the fact that education is a human right, that the desire to grow and to know and to learn is something that is fundamental to us as human beings. And to deny it, I think, is an abuse. And so that's the biggest reason we do what we do. There are the practical reasons, and those very often matter most to people, but I think that's the biggest reason we do what we do. Let me turn now, just watching the time here, and I will, by the way, I'll be hanging around. I hear there are potatoes afterwards, so I'm definitely hanging around and be happy to answer questions people might have. So I want to turn now to just the experience of teaching inside the prison. So you drive about an hour southwest of here, as I say, to the ERDCC in Bonne Terre, Missouri. You get there, and you can imagine getting inside the prison. You have an ID, they scan it, you get face scanned, your stuff goes through an airport scanner, you stand in a body scanner. If you have a lot of stuff, it's in a clear prison issue backpack, right? So it can be seen, and what you have inside your backpack can be seen at all times. And still, they will open it and search it. I usually, as Mike said, I'm running a book club right now, and usually all I have is a book, but I'll get in, they'll flip through the pages, make sure there's nothing illicit. You go through, and by the way, I should say, like a lot of people of my background and privilege, my first contact with the prison system was teaching inside this program, right? I had no prior experience. And my vision of prisons was based probably mostly on the Shawshank Redemption. That was the extent of my knowledge, right? The ERDCC doesn't look like that. It's less than 30 years old. You have to imagine, I don't know if anyone's driven by it, but it's a big camp. The buildings are all, this sort of bland off-white institutional color. It's airlocks, there are no bars, it's heavy metal doors, it's antiseptic and kind of soulless, right? So you go through the airlock, you get, your ID gets scanned, you're issued a radio, and then it's out into the yard, lock gate, razor wire everywhere, and then to the education building where we actually do our work. You have to get there about a half hour early if you really want to start on time, because it's going to take that long for them to release all the men who are in our classes. Right? There's count 6 times a day, right? 6 times a day, everything inside the prison stops so they can count everybody, and if it's off, everyone waits. So if you've ever done this, you've had the joyous experience of being stuck there for half an hour, 45 minutes, because they don't have count right. And until count's right, nobody moves. Right? But if everything is working, and usually it isn't, but if it is, the guys will show up and class starts. And that's when, and I can't stress this enough, other than the fact that you're in this sort of bland soulless classroom and everyone besides you is wearing gray, right? It is the most rewarding, exciting teaching I've done in my 30-year career. These are men who have, it's returning adult students, and if you've had any experience teaching returning adult students, they're coming at their education in a different way because of where they're coming from and because of what they've been through. So the biggest piece of advice I give to my colleagues when they start to teach in the program is you have got to be on your game, because they will be. They will have done the reading twice, right? They will ask you, on page 17 it says this, Paul, but on page 45 it says this, and those things seem to contradict each other, right? So you've got to be ready for those kinds of questions. No one's got a cell phone, right? You're not distracted by that kind of stuff. And I'm hesitant in speaking this way because I don't want it to sound like, most of my students at St. Louis University, they're also great, but they're young, right? And part of their college experience is figuring out, I think I need to take this seriously, right? And sometimes that takes a little while. It might take a year or two. Certainly took a year or two for me. Maybe some of you can relate to that experience. But for our guys in the prison education program, they're ready and they're eager. When the program started, there were 15 seats. That's how small it was, right? There were 300 applications for those 15 seats. And that kind of desire has continued. They are ready, they are eager, they are willing, they ask questions. One story, a couple stories I'll quickly tell, was when a student came up to me and I'd given him a C on a paper. And if you've had any teaching experience, college teaching, the conversation began like this. You gave me a C on this paper. And usually at St. Louis, at our main campus, that conversation goes in a different direction, usually having to do with med school and what will happen to me if I don't get into med school, right? This guy said, you gave me a C on this paper, so I busted my ass on this next draft, and that's at least a B. This is at least a B. Now, if a student, an 18-year-old said to me today, I worked my tail off and I'm pretty sure I got a B, I'd be flabbergasted, right? But it's a different thing in there, right? It's a different attitude to what they're doing. The grades are not, the sort of ticket they need to get to the next level. And I don't blame our St. Louis students for that. That's a reality we have created, right? They haven't created it. But inside, it's different. The other thing I should have mentioned is what grew out of that conversation with the assistant warden who said, this kind of ticks me off, is that SLU decided at that point to offer the exact same programming to corrections staff. And that at that time, thank you very much, thank you. And I should say, this is all offered free of charge, right? There's absolutely no charge to any of the students inside or outside. And that was made possible because of SLU's commitment to this, right? Including the commitment of our former president, Lawrence Biondi, and longtime St. Louisians may remember Larry Biondi, a rather larger-than-life personality, who I think charitably, neutrally could be said, could be a tough customer. I think it's I know this is being streamed, and I want to be careful about how I put that. He was a tough customer, right? But when he heard about it, he immediately said, we'll waive the tuition for everyone. And again, this was when Pell Grants weren't available. The program simply would not have happened if that had not been the case. So we offer it to corrections staff, and at the time that made our program absolutely unique in the country. It's since other programs have started to do that as well. Because the rate in St. Francois County, where the prison is, only about 10% of adults hold bachelor's degrees. Right? But a funny story with that, we've had a couple of students come back to St. Louis, to the main campus, to finish their education, which is deeply gratifying, right? And one of these guys was telling the story that he was in a cell one day. They were doing Econ 1900, our introductory econ course. And he's doing his homework, and a guard comes up to him. And as you can imagine, relationships between the guards and the men aren't always friendly. And the guard said, "What are you in that SLU program? What are you doing?" He said, "Yeah, I'm in the SLU program doing my homework." He said, "Yeah, what are you working on right now?" "Econ." And she said, "You're doing Econ 1900?" "Uh-huh." "What'd you get for number 4 on that test we just," right? Now that doesn't always happen. The classes don't always line up, but I think the effect of our being able to offer the programming to both groups is significant. It's actually very often harder for the corrections staff because Missouri is 49th in the nation for corrections pay. And so the prison system suffers massive, chronic staffing shortages. And those were exacerbated by COVID, which you heard mentioned earlier, which was a very difficult time, as you can imagine. And so at times the staff are simply, and the corrections officer union has basically been busted by the state government. They have very little bargaining power. So it's actually much harder for the corrections staff because they're so often being pulled on mandatory double shifts to cover for the shortages, right? But I will say that the biggest, we offer to the corrections staff in part because we want to offer them the chance to advance in the system if they wish to. But that's not the reason they say. The biggest reason I heard when I directed the program from female members of the staff class was this. This isn't really, they would say, this isn't going to make that big a difference on my advancement ladder, but I want my kids to see me do this. Right? I want them to know that this can be done by their mother, right? That's who I think the simplest way to describe our prison system is that the extremely poor are being housed by the working poor, right? That's what it's really about. In just the last couple minutes, I'd say that I have left here, the best way you can support prison education, I think, is the way you vote, of course. The way you donate, right? The biggest thing prison education programs need is funding support, because most of them, like SLU, like Wash U, which has, their program is growing. Rockhurst now has a program in the state. These programs are growing across the state. Most of them are supported by philanthropic giving, by grant writing. We get major donation giving from, say, the Hearst Foundation or Mellon, those big places. Then we do a lot of smaller St. Louis ones. But the biggest way you can support is by giving. It's difficult, and I should say it's difficult to volunteer with the programs because, of course, that means getting inside. And the prison system is very, very reluctant to have large numbers of volunteers, right? It's the biggest challenge we have with people who want to help because, of course, they want to meet the guys, right? And of course you do, right? But it's a challenge because the Department of Corrections, for reasons you can imagine, is very reluctant to have expansive voter rolls. But I would just close, watching the clock here, I don't want to go over time, and as I say, we'll be downstairs afterwards if you have questions. The growth of prison education over the last 10, 15 years is miraculous. It needs to continue, and it is, I'll quote Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist, who himself was imprisoned for 4 years for being part of a freethinker group that seemed not aligned with the Tsar. So he was in prison for 4 years and wrote a book about it called Notes from a Dead House, in which he says a society's moral worth can be judged by the way it treats its incarcerated people, right? I have to say, under that standard, our nation must be under a very harsh judgment indeed, because we have a long way to go across the entire criminal justice system, which I'll be happy to, again, talk about in Q&A. But prison education is an enormous glimmer of light in that darkness, and so I hope you can support it. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Paul. That is an amazing experience. I'm glad you came here and shared that with us. As he mentioned, he volunteered to stick around and visit with us downstairs over potatoes. Please join me in welcoming Dan Overman from our Stewardship Task Force for a brief update on our annual pledge drive.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Overman, and my pronouns are he and him. Well, I have good news and some not so good news. The good news is next week will be the last week to hear about the pledge campaign. The not so good news, Bear, if you would show our slide of the progress of the pledge campaign. As you can see, we have a little way to go to hit our targets, so keep that in mind. As you can see from the updated graphic, there remains quite a way to go to hit our targets. The second message I have today is to share an observation linking the content of last week's speaker to the importance of sustainability of the ethical society. Last week's presentation by Melanie Tracer King focused on the importance of using critical thinking skills to question beliefs and to avoid misinformation traps. Additionally, as part of her presentation, she shared a comment about how special this community is. If taken on face value on just Sunday's presentation, that statement could easily have been construed as a disingenuous audience candy. However, when viewed in the context of the personal story she shared at the presentation the previous evening, a more complete meaning revealed itself. She was raised as a creationist in a small rural Iowa town where the prevailing worldview was rooted in literal biblical interpretation. Can you imagine the enormous emotional toll she experienced during her journey from creationist to biologist? At the time of her transition, she could not even imagine a community like ours where we are not just free to question and free to choose our beliefs, we are encouraged to do so. And just as importantly, we are free to change our minds as new pertinent information becomes available. My empathy soared as I considered the personal turmoil of her journey from a literal biblical worldview to that of a scientist and a critical thinker. I have a pretty good suspicion that many in this room have experienced their own personal upheaval as part of their own journey in such a similar way. To be candid, I must admit that the issue of critical thinking is so integrated into our core values and community that I've been taking it for granted. At the end of the day, it reminded me that our community's advocacy and support of critical thinking really is special and very much worth sustaining. Please take this into account when considering to make a pledge. And for those who have already pledged, thank you so very much for your generosity and support. For those who have yet to make a pledge, please consider doing this week, since this is the last week. And in closing, if you're hanging around today, here's the thought. For the social hour today, why not ask some of those around you about their obstacles and their journey in dealing with this same thing? Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. The welcome team will now take up a collection to support the society. They did that. Never mind. The welcome team has already taken up a collection to support the society. Get kind of tunnel vision up here, so thank you. If you are interested in joining the Ethical Society, or you are a visitor and would like to know more about the society, please visit the Visitors Connect table in the Becker Room after platform today. I have a couple of announcements. Calling all problem solvers and jigsaw puzzle lovers. It's time to put your wits to the test and beat the clock in the puzzle race. This competition is all about speed, strategy, and smarts as you and your squad battle it out to be crowned the fastest puzzle-solving champions. Please join the fundraising team for a puzzle race on April 26th here at the Ethical Society. Prizes will be awarded for the fastest 3 teams. Doors open at 6:30. The timed event starts at 7 and ends at 9. Cost is $15 per person or $60 for a team. Sign up for a table of up to 4 team members. You can register online or after platform. Bring your own food, beverages, cups, and napkins. The fundraiser benefits the Ethical Society. We have our navigators will come up and do my next announcement for me, and then I'll step back up. Thank you.
We are members of Navigators Chapter 33. We are hosting lunch downstairs right after platform. The cost is $7 for adults and $3 for kids.
The menu is vegan and gluten-free, but not all toppings are. We have baked potatoes, salads, black beans, asparagus with mushrooms.
Already have lunch plans? We've got you covered for dessert with a bake sale. I tried the lemon cupcakes. They're really good. You should try them. Basically, Navigators is a national, secular, inclusive scouting group, and we meet here maybe like once a month for a bake sale and lunch.
The money we raise today will help send our families to New York for National Jamboree and other programs. See you all downstairs.
The April 13th Climate Action Now Forum for next week has been rescheduled. The presentation by Dan Overman about our building's history and its pathways to sustainability and accessibility will be our 9:45 forum on April 20th. Next Sunday's April 13th 9:45 forum will be a community dialogue about our society's continued affiliation with the American Ethical Union. The forum will be led by the Board of Trustees in the Hankey Room. We would love to keep you informed about future events at the Ethical Society of St. Louis. You may use the QR code to sign up for the weekly newsletter, check the Friends of the Ethical Society Facebook group, or email the relevant staff person or member. This is a busy and vibrant place that relies on volunteers, and I hope you get involved and connected into the community in ways that feel meaningful for you. Let's welcome back Katera to the stage for her final selection. This is another original tune, this titled Phoenix Rising.
I wanna go. Can we me. I catch my face in the mirror, clearer days ahead of me, so I see no tears on my face. Kissed by the sun, the warmest of days, I finally go where I'm meant to be. Ashes to ashes, but the new me. Finally go where I'm meant to be. Ashes to ashes, but the new me. Finally go where I'm meant to be. Ashes to ashes, but the new me. Finally go where I'm meant to be. Ashes to ashes, but the new me. See that place. I just wanna be what I wanna be. I'm free, yeah. Let it be today. I just wanna be who I'm supposed to be. Can we I'm from St. Louis, born and raised, you guys. Born and raised, y'all. Thank y'all for welcoming me as somebody born and raised in St. Louis. And I've been researching this facility for a while, and just based off of my beliefs, I'm really honored to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Katara. We were honored as well. I assure you, Katara mentioned, of course, this is her first time in our building today, and I'm glad we found each other. Thank all of you for being here today, for each other, and for yourselves. I hope today's platform helped you feel more connected to one another and motivated you to get involved in the community and causes that you are passionate about. I also welcome you to spend more time in community today. There is coffee in the large room downstairs, as well as our monthly first Sunday lunch we heard about from the Navigators. Today is also our last Sunday with Youth Education Director Courtney Scott Camerata. We thank her for her deep connections with and care for our youth, and we wish her all the best. Please consider grabbing a thank you card from the welcome table and sharing your warm wishes with her downstairs. Thank you for spending your morning with us. Have a great rest of your day and a wonderful week.
coming back. Good. We'll have you on our list. Awesome. I mean, you were non-performing, just Michael told me about the puzzle club. Yes. I love potatoes. Y'all got me on 3 things. Just like the beliefs and values of being a community. So, so I sing at Cantor for Advent Christian Church. Oh, okay. Oh, nice. Yeah, I love it. Ice cream. It's an ice cream store. Okay, so one of the elementary schools in my area is that's a school? Yes. Oh, I thought that was ice cream. You would think that. Interesting. So I'm close to like where the Starbucks is. Hardware kind of. What was it, Grizzle Plaza? Yeah. Yeah, we're right. Yeah. Athens, like, what, 2 months away from here? There's a big mega church. Oh, okay.